This is Elizabeth Townsend. This is for Demas. I was preparing for Lives in the Law Project. This is an interview with Suzanne Rabe, and it is August 22nd, 2001. So, first question, easy question. What made you decide to go to law school, and was it what you expected when you got there?
I decided to go to law school because I was very involved in the anti-war movement and also in women's liberation. That's what we called it at the time. And the heroes of both of those movements, in many aspects, were the lawyers. The left really relied upon the lawyers to bring some victories that helped those movements. So for two reasons I became a lawyer. One, I thought the work would be interesting and valuable and worthwhile. Some of the values in politics I had, but I also knew I had to make a living. I did not come from a wealthy family and knew that I wanted to have some security in life, and I felt I could find it with being a lawyer. So I was pretty motivated. I first decided I wanted to become a lawyer when I was fairly young.
How young?
Actually, I thought of becoming a lawyer and announced in grammar school that I wanted to be a lawyer probably in the second grade. So that was even before my politics came into view. But I used to go downtown with my dad. He worked in downtown Phoenix, and in the summertime he would take me downtown with him. From the time I was about 8 up, and he would drop me off at the courthouse in the morning. He would come and pick me up for lunch, and then he would come and pick me up again at 5 o'clock, and I would watch various trials. And I remember my mother getting very angry with him one time because he had let me watch a rape trial. And the funny thing about it was I had no idea what rape was. I just thought it meant assault. I thought it meant hitting someone. So that was when I learned what rape was. But when she got so angry at my father. But the lawyers would come up to me and talk to me and ask why I was watching the trial. My father had nothing to do with the legal profession, and I would kind of find my own. My mother would even find him in the newspaper and say, "There's an interesting trial going on. You could take Suzanne down." I would just sit in the courthouse and watch them, and I really enjoyed doing that. I remember one lawyer who was a fairly prominent lawyer in Phoenix who was representing someone in a trial. He came up and asked me what I was doing there and why I was there. They often thought maybe I was related to a witness or one of the parties. And I told him why, and he looked at me and he said, "I hate women lawyers." And it didn't really bother me at all. It was a little awkward. And I said, fine. And but anyway, at that time it was very unusual for a woman to be a lawyer. But by the time I got to law school, it was almost 50% of the class.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. First, how did you your dad dropped you off? Was it your idea to go there, or how did that all work?
It's sort of family lore. I don't really remember how that worked. I think I said one time, "Hey, I'd like to see a trial." Remember, those were the days of Perry Mason, and I wasn't allowed to watch TV very much, so I must have said I wanted to see a trial, and they knew the courthouse was downtown, and he just let me go do that. And once I found it so interesting, they allowed me to continue doing it. Things were, I assume, thought of as a little safer in those days, and it was a fairly safe environment just to leave a child in a courtroom. There wasn't much that could happen to me if they trusted me not to leave.
How old were you when you started doing this?
I think I was about 8,
Wow.
8 or 9, yeah, when I would do that. And I didn't do it day in and day out. I just did it occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
A few times a year I would do that with my dad. And I remember liking to watch the trials. And when I was in law school, I got a job with the Pima County Public Defender's Office, and I would work, I was hired, I think, to work 20 hours a week throughout law school, and I would often go across and watch trials during that period of time, not during the time I was paid to do, but especially if a motion of mine was being argued or something was interesting, you would hear what was going on in the courthouse. I did a lot of trial watching throughout law school. Not so much in my first year, but in the summer after my first and all through my second and third year, I spent a good time in the Pima County courthouse.
And okay, before we go on, because I know about being. Did you find? I know you did well. You did very well at law school, and you liked law school. Is that
no,
true?
I didn't.
You didn't.
I hated law school.
You
I
hated
law
law
school. Yes.
Oh,
if you
well.
want the actual truth about it. I'm not sure. I wasn't emotionally miserable. I didn't have any problem with it, but I always wanted to leave. the minute class was over, and I had a life outside of law school. I had friends, I had a community that I felt close with, and I didn't have warm feelings about law school. I was surprised when I came to law school that the professors I had known in undergrad were friendly, and if you would go to their office during office hours, I just remember it being collegial, and I remember the relationships with TAs and the professors being very collegial. And at least it was my perception in law school, was that the professors were not interested in us, that they had in general disdain for the students that they were teaching, that they didn't seem to respect us as a group, and I didn't take that personally at all. I just sort of felt like there wasn't anything much here for me except for to study. And there were professors that were different, and it wasn't, everything wasn't bad, but I found it to be a very I did not find it to be a community of learners, which is what you hear our law school described as now. And I do think it's very, very much different.
Hold on. I'm going to open. I think they're here.
Oh, it is.
You can do the introduction for him.
Okay. Fred Kay has just joined us. Suzanne's spouse, husband, mate, whatever you want the word you want to use. Husband is the word. Okay. So we had just asked Suzanne about why she went to law school and if it was what she expected when she got here. So we'll ask you this. I'll ask you again that question, and then we can move on to other sort of communal questions. So, why did you decide to go to law school, and was it what you expected it to be when you got there?
Well, I guess I decided, many years ago that I thought it would be interesting. Was it what I expected? Probably. Did it prepare me well for being a lawyer? Probably not.
Why not?
Well, I graduated in '69, and in those days, they didn't have, I did do a clinical program. I didn't go to law school here. I did do a clinical program, but there was really very little supervision. And when I got out and I was thrown into the practice of law, there really wasn't anybody to teach you other than just going into court and watching people. That's the way I learned. And there weren't treatises like there are now. I've been in criminal law all my life, and I used to use Am Jura and Corpus Juris Secundum as my source books. I mean, that's how bad it was. There just weren't. Now we have a whole library full of criminal law treatises, but there weren't in those days. And in fact, I remember being in a trial with Bob Hirsch, who's a lawyer in town, and he had a little paper-bound book from the Practicing Law Institute on search and seizure, and I thought, boy, that's really great. And I immediately ordered myself a copy because there just wasn't anything like that around.
And how does that change? How does having that stuff, does it just change the whole nature of it?
Oh yeah, nowadays you can, besides doing regular research, you can pull out a treatise on something and start from there. It's just so much time saving involved. It's totally different. I mean, you can see other people's work, what they've done. You don't have to reinvent the wheel because you can look at a treatise and there's all the cases. Supplement. Yeah, it's totally different. And plus computers now, we didn't have those. Everybody was typing on a typewriter in those days.
What did you do? Let me ask you. Why did you decide criminal work?
I sort of fell into it. I got offered a job at the city prosecutor's office as a clerk, actually. And then when I passed the bar, I became a couple months later. I became a lawyer and I was offered a job as a prosecutor. I'm a little hot because I rode my bike. Okay. But so I sort of fell into it, and then when the Pima County Public Defender office opened up in 1970, I was offered a job there, and I've been doing it ever since.
And what did you do when you finished law school, Suzanne?
I clerked for Judge Tang, who's deceased now, but was a judge on the Ninth Circuit. His chambers were in Phoenix, and so I moved to Phoenix and worked for him. And he usually stayed in San Francisco, though sometimes in Pasadena, and in our year in Hawaii. That was fun. And so we would go with him to arguments, the clerks would. And I did that for a year. And then following that, I taught writing. I was a legal writing professor at the University of California, Berkeley, at Bold Hall, at their School of Law. And I did that as a lark. They had this program where they hired recent graduates to teach law. They generally hired their own graduates to do it, but I got a flyer as a clerk for a federal judge and thought it would be just a hoot to live in Berkeley for a year and so, or two. So I worked there. But during that time, Fred and I decided to get married, and I moved back to Phoenix so that we could, Tucson, I'm sorry. I moved to Tucson so that we could live in the same city. And started to work at Southern Arizona Legal Aid, where I worked for some time after that.
Okay, you want to ask some personal questions? You don't have to answer them, but they're what popped into mind. How did you two meet? And were you both like, was it law-based? Was it like how, like, sort of like, we have other couples that are two lawyers, and sort of how did you meet, and sort of how does the law how much is the law in your daily life? Do you talk about things with each other, or it's kind of two questions? So maybe.
Well, I think we met law-based because we went to a wedding of another lawyer.
Two lawyers.
Two lawyers, yeah. And that's where we met. But as in our daily life, I defer to Suzanne on anything legal. So I don't think we talk about legal things, cases and things like that, but I don't know, probably less all the time. What do you think?
Well, I always used to think we got along better because if he had something important or I had something important that was due the next day, or we were in the middle of something that was very nerve-wracking, I think we just instinctively understood what the other one was going through. I never asked for attention when he was in the middle of a trial. I don't think I ever did. I never asked for, and he never did. He understood if I had an important motion for judgment in the morning, or if I had to go see a witness. And I think we had really referred to how really stressful the practice of law can be and how you can get thrown into it. So I think that was good. I think it's bad for our children to have two lawyers or parents. I don't know if it's bad, but I think it's very unusual. I think the topics around the dinner table, the way that we analyze things, some of the decisions that we come to, I think that it's a different atmosphere to have two people who are legally trained to be making decisions and excluding evidence when we can't really look at that when we're deciding a curfew, because that would be unfair. And I think it's different having two lawyers as parents. I remember quizzing the kids at dinner hour on the different Bill of Rights. If they could memorize it, and in the car going through different legal concepts and things like that. And I guess that's good, but I think it's unusual. I think it's okay being married to her. I think it's good. I used to write his briefs for him when I was off and not working full time. And he would get really swamped and would say to me, do you remember, I can't go to the Little League game because I have to write a brief. And I would say, I'll write the brief, and he would be stuck going to the Little League game.
I liked it because she did a better job than I did.
But I always thought maybe the Federal Defender's Office got more than a full employee, because he would work more than full time, and then I would take up the slack with all the extra. But it was fun, because when I was home with the kids, it was fun having some legal issue to write about or to study or to know about. I think it's been fine being married to a lawyer. And actually, I love lawyers. I respect lawyers, and I respect the practice of law, and I really respect Fred, and I really respect the practice of a public defender. And so this sounds very corny, Fred, but I'm very proud to be married to a public defender. It's true. He knows that. He just wouldn't want me to put it on tape.
It's too late now.
She can erase it if you don't like it.
Well, you both chose things that kind of cause, or they're I don't know how you say it, but with legal aid and public defender, you're defending the people who have the least power in society, and that probably isn't a coincidence that you're both. That seems like it must be part of a philosophy as well of life. One's not a tax lawyer, the other one's. It's just.
Well, let's let the
similar.
Republican explain that.
I feel good about representing, the disenfranchised people that they're getting really chewed up by the system, and it feels good if you get a good result, and you can't expect to get a good result all the time, but feels good beating the system, or beating the establishment, so to speak. And that's what, basically a prosecutor's office is that's where they hold themselves out. So it feels good. And I enjoy it.
Does it ever get hard? I mean, you've been there a long time. Do you find that, we talked to Joel Paris, and he had said that he had coping mechanisms when things were bad, or that he had sort of figured out strategies, that you see a lot of sort of hard people in difficult situations. Do you find that difficult, or have you just learned to,
Well, there's some really hard cases. I mean, we get awful murder cases, we get, sex abuse and children and rape cases, and just some really hard cases. And we get, drug cases that are, the client has committed an illegal act, but the penalties are way in excess of what they should be, or an immigration case. And, you have to be able to deal with it. You can't just get so frustrated that you walk away, because if you do, you get into something else. But, I guess I rationalize that, I'm not the reason this person is here. I'm here to help this person. And I use certain coping mechanisms or rationalizations, but I enjoy it. The fact that the case is really bad, it just doesn't deter you from doing it. Doesn't deter me anyway.
Is it hard to stop? I mean, maybe you don't. Some people say that they don't stop thinking about it when they go home, or that it's hard for them to switch gears, and other people say it's really easy to keep it the problems that you see, and does it spill into the rest of your life, or have you figured out ways to?
No, I take it home. I don't think it affects my behavior. I hope it doesn't, but I take it home. I've got poor work habits, and I always bring work home and do work at home. And then if I'm in a trial or something big, I'm spending as much time at home as I am in the office. So I haven't ever mastered the ability to compartmentalize it. I'll bring it home.
Do you ever get? And I'll ask you. I'll switch the questions in just a second. Do you ever feel like particular cases or problems you see it like for instance, my Ron, when he reads, I can my spouse, his whole personality changes depending on what he's reading. So he's reading a happy book, he's very happy, and when he's reading like a difficult book, do you see that with cases, or do you think that you both sort of, do you know what I mean? Like when something's very hard, I don't know. I'm not explaining myself very well, but sort of.
I think we know what you're asking.
Yeah.
I guess I should answer that because you're trying cases.
I'm pretty flat, but she gets something.
Fred never changes. He's a pleasant person. He's a warm person. He doesn't get stressed out. And if he has a very, very difficult case, I think he just lets us know that, and we give him some space to work on it. I get a little more nervous when I'm working on a case. I'm more of a perfectionist. Yes.
How do you give him space? What do you mean by that?
Well, meaning that no one would ever insist that he go to our son's saxophone concert the night that he's in the middle of a trial, or there would never be any argument about that. Artists really respect what he does for a living too. So he's very even. I remember he gave me a coping mechanism one time when I was representing a particularly difficult immigration client. The client wasn't difficult, but the case was difficult. The client had a lot of equities, a lot of family ties, and was very needed by his children and family here. But he had some cocaine and was going to be deported for it. Although that client ended up not being deported for that, we were able to seek a waiver. But Fred told me, just say to yourself, I'm not the one who sold the cocaine. And it's funny, over the years, I've told myself that in so many statements that weren't even legal. I'll say to myself, I'm not the one who sold the cocaine, and it will have nothing to do with cocaine or whatever, but it reminds me that I don't necessarily hold the key to winning everything, and it's not necessarily always my fault. But another thing Fred told me was, I remember when I was pregnant with Elena, you had a case that involved a prospector at a tombstone. The silver prospector, an old guy.
Henry Farabee. And I didn't know if I should mention the name. And I think he almost missed the birth of Elena because of Henry Farabee. He worked on that case for months and months. It was an old prospector who was charged with securities fraud. And Fred, it was the question of whether he knew that the mine would turn up with no silver. It was just an old prospector. It was a very interesting case. And
thought he would win it. And when he came out, the jury took about an hour or an hour and a half to come back guilty on every count. When he came home to dinner, I was there. Our whole family was upset that he had lost that case. We loved Henry Farabee and knew he had never intended to defraud the people who invested in his little silver mine. And he was just eating his peas. Do you remember that? You were eating peas, and I said, "Fred, aren't you upset?" And you looked at me and you said, "If I wanted to win cases, I would have been a prosecutor." And you went on eating your peas. Remember that? So I think he has good coping mechanisms of understanding that he does what he can.
What about when, yes, I'm trying to think of sort of when the coping mechanisms don't work. Like, what do you mean, like when, like...
They always work.
They always work.
Don't they?
We're here. I guess. I don't know.
I don't remember seeing Fred upset once you can tell me if this should be rewound and put over. In the whole time we've been married, I only remember one time Fred actually noticing some nerves, and actually he was not sleeping well during that period. And it was a period of time when he had refused a request or an order from the Ninth Circuit on a personnel matter. He was standing up to him on the grounds of ethics. I shouldn't give the exact scenario, but it was a personnel matter, and he refused to do something the Ninth Circuit, which are his employers. He refused to do what he do, and it looked like he was going to lose his job over it. And I remember, do you remember a few sleepless nights over that? Or, yeah, I do. You never mentioned anything, but I remember that. And I think that's about the only, I think it was a stress for him, because the Ninth Circuit was ordering him to do something that he felt was unethical as a lawyer to do. And he eventually hired a lawyer that cost many thousands of dollars out of our family budget, and was successful in challenging the order. But that's the only time I remember you ever being nervous. Remember in Maine?
Yeah.
We were on vacation, and we had to go to a library to find out the grounds for termination for a federal public defender. We had to stop at Bowdoin College.
I was just curious.
Remember Bowdoin? But I get more nervous than you do.
Yeah.
But it never gets out of control. No.
So when you're nervous, what do you do?
I work. When I'm nervous, I work. The reason I'm usually nervous about a case is because I'm afraid that I'm missing something, or I'm not doing everything I should in order to prevail in the case for the client. And so usually I work. I take extra time at the office. I ask for extra help at home. I cut out other activities I'm doing if I need extra time to work on the case. It's just what I do. It's been a while since I practiced law. I get the same thing here at the law school. When I get nervous about something that's happening here at the law school, I remember one time I got a hotel room. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I had to give a presentation here at the law school, and I couldn't get any peace at home. We had a foreign exchange student and our 2 teenage children and Fred, and all kinds of chaos, and my daughter had switched high schools in the middle of a week, and I got a hotel room for 3 nights before I had to give a presentation here at the law school. It was wonderful. No one believed I would do it. Remember, they all laughed. They said, "You're really doing this?" I went to the Marriott and stayed there for 3 days and prepared for my presentation. I called home to see how everybody was every once in a while. So I coped that way.
We'll do a little bit more work stuff, and then we'll maybe do some balancing of life stuff. Or not balancing of life, however you want to phrase it. But we're sort of thinking back to sort of when you first started practicing law. Sort of what were like difficult? We've talked to people a lot about different things, but we're going to get to sort of like hard times when you thought like not your worst moment, but scary moments, or like how you like different things like that. I don't know if that's very helpful, but sort of when you think back to the first time, maybe it's your first day or your first trial, or sort of those experiences. And I don't know if you have any story. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Or if you did something and you thought about it later and you thought, you know what, I probably should have done that differently.
Well, I've done that lots of times. No, I think I've been fortunate. I've always had other people I've worked with, and I've been able to bounce ideas and questions off, and we've had I've had good working relationships with people. So, but I think in the practice of law, you, at least when I started, you learned a lot by doing, and you weren't always sure you were doing the right thing, and sometimes judges would get a little bit angry and upset, and you just, you learn. But it was, I think I wasn't a sole practitioner, and I think that was helpful. I think that would be very difficult, especially as a new lawyer, to be on your own. I think that'd be very hard. You need somebody to bounce things off of. I used to be able to do a lot of court watching before law school, and I thought that was helpful. In fact, that probably cemented my reason for going to law school, is because I'd see a lot of lawyers, and I used to say to myself, I can do that better. And so.
When you went court watching, because you said that too, that what were you watching? What kind of things were you seeing when you were
Well, the
court
human
watching?
drama and just the lawyers, how they would do things. I mean, it's kind of hard to step in and out, which is I did a lot, and get the full picture, but you would just see how cases were handled, and I visualized myself in that position. Could I do that? And I always thought I could.
He was a process server before he was a lawyer, and he also Fred's father owned Tucson Office Supply downtown, so on Congress Street, so he worked at Tucson Office Supply. So my guess is that you did that.
Well, I did it when I was a process server, mostly because I'd be at the courthouse a lot, and visiting lawyers' offices, and I'd get to know them, and of course if I had any free time, I'd just duck into a courtroom and see what's going on, and it was interesting. I mean, it's like theater in a lot of respects, and just interesting. I still like to do it.
Yeah, I like to.
Busman's holiday.
I know. I like them.
Yeah.
That thing about the question about fear. I agree with Fred's answer about working with good people. When I was at Legal Aid, there was a lawyer there named Bill Morris, William E. Morris, and he was my supervisor, and he was a friend at there. And Bill was a genius, and he could do anything, and had a photographic memory, and he died last year, and when he did, the State Bar honored him in their magazine. He quoted in the paper as saying that he's done more good for this state than all the other lawyers combined. He was very well respected a lawyer, and he gave me power, because when I was representing, I did immigration law, but when I couldn't get access to a client at the juvenile detention center because I wasn't the attorney of record in the criminal case, Bill gave me power to sue the entire juvenile system, and to bring causes of action for strip searches and anything anything that I felt was illegal and unconstitutional that was going on there. I couldn't have done that without knowing that he would help me, and that even though I had to do the research and draft the complaint and have the ideas, that he was right next to me every single minute, and I was able to bring both small and large actions, both important and seemingly unimportant actions, and defend them, because I had a really brilliant lawyer who helped me do that. I felt like I had the opportunity of a lifetime to work with Bill Morris. But I think that you'll find most lawyers who have someone that they feel they're thankful. I know Fred feels that way about Frank Zapata, about but
Art Fuller.
Yeah, Art Fuller, who's now deceased, but many of the people he worked with.
If you've got somebody that you can go to and they have confidence, it just empowers you. Whereas if you go to somebody, well, I don't know, and they're more wishy-washy than you are, you start going down the drain. So you need somebody that can. And sometimes it's easier if you're the other lawyer to empower the one that comes to you, because it sometimes looks easier to you than it does to the person that's doing the job. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't remember ever being terribly fearful. Do you remember?
Oh, I used to get pretty nervous sometimes when I wasn't confident in what I was doing. Yeah, you got a lot at stake.
Yes, I mean, Fred's office represents the inmates in their last appeals in the Arizona death row, and there are now about 125 people on death row. That's a large number of people in a small office, and quite a few of those end up as the clients in Fred's office.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of work, there can be nothing more stressful. I don't know how many people we lost last year.
We just lost a lawyer. He's leaving. to go to another job because of the stress. He had a client executed, and it's been about a year, but it's been eating on him, and he just said no more, you know. And I think we got 6 lawyers in the office doing that kind of work now, and they're a special breed. And I've never handled one of those cases personally, and I think I could handle it, but I don't know what I'd feel like when it came time to, when you lost it and they were going to execute your client. I mean, I think you'd go through a lot of emotions, from being upset to being angry at the state, and I don't know. So personally, for myself, I have not personally handled one of those, but we had 6 executions in 1 year, about a year ago, and it's really stressful. It's very difficult.
Have you ever been scared of clients?
Yeah, I think of 1 or 2 that I thought were pretty scary. I wasn't scared from my own personal safety that I was going to be assaulted, but I can remember one client that I had about 20 years ago on a murder case, and I was interviewing him, and he had killed his stepfather, and we were talking, and he was describing it just very matter of fact, like we're talking right now, and I was feeling these emotions like, oh, he probably really feels bad, he regrets this happens, and here we are, and we got to deal with it. And I said that to him, and he just, in this cold manner to me, said, hell no, I don't feel sorry. That son of a bitch deserved it. And I just got this chill, you know. And he got about 20 years, and he got out eventually, and I got him back again on a parole matter, and he hadn't really changed. And yeah, he was a little bit of a frightening guy. I thought, not for myself personally, but just kind of like a time bomb.
And were you ever scared, like, okay, I'm a scaredy cat, so I'll ask a couple scared questions. Were you ever scared, and I'll ask you the scared question too in a second. Were you ever scared of clients like coming after your family, or finding out where you live, or any of those things that you see on TV? like the scare,
No.
like somehow like they're gonna be.
Not really, because
No?
I'm the good guy. I'm the one that's
Right.
helping them.
That's right.
But what's funny, no, I don't really think I can't remember, but I always marvel at the fact that clients of mine aren't mad at the judge and aren't mad at the prosecutor, but they seem to be matter of fact about it. They do get a little upset with you as the lawyer, but I've never felt they're going to come around my house. I don't think, did I?
Well, I remember you've noted how many security measures are taken by some prosecutors and some judges, and I believe you noted to me that the statistics seem to show that they kill their lawyers, their own lawyers.
Well, that's domestic relation case.
Well, but
Not
but
really.
I think even a lawyer, I think a criminal defendant expects the prosecutor to be doing his or her job, and expects the judge to be doing his or her job, but expects the lawyer to get the defendant off. But I've never seen Fred fearful of a client, and I have never been fearful of any Fred's clients. He's certainly brought them to dinner, and we've had people work on our house, or people like that who needed some extra money, and our kids have never been brought up to be afraid of the client. So I've never felt any fear, but I do think it's interesting. I think it shows a different mindset that in general, I don't know, just my feeling is that public defenders aren't generally afraid of the clients, when in fact they're probably the ones in the most danger. But no one's, I think, in that much danger.
Clients do get upset with their criminal defense lawyer because, it's your fault if something goes wrong. But as far as being afraid, I mean, I can remember one time when I had this, I guess he was a kid, I think he was around 18, maybe a little younger, that had been convicted of a very, very brutal sexual offense on one of the Indian reservations, and this was a long time ago, and he was on release status, and I wasn't afraid of him at all. He was obviously a harmless guy. This thing was a situational thing that he's a very primitive guy, and he didn't, I mean, it may sound silly that he didn't know how to relate to a woman, but it was a
Excuse me, stop it. You can't have that.
No, but
Just say it without it.
what I'm saying is, when he came for sentencing, he came to town a day early from the reservation, a remote reservation, and he didn't have a place to stay, and I had him over at my house, and had him for dinner, and I had, wife, a couple kids there, and I said, you can sleep on the couch, and when I got up the next morning, he wasn't there, And I went down and told the judge, well, I had him there, but he was gone. And he showed up a couple hours later, and he was the kind of a guy that just felt uncomfortable in the house. And he was ill at ease. It's not some kind of a place that he'd ever been to before. And he told me he just went to the park and slept in the park overnight. And, I mean, I wasn't worried about this guy, that he was going to hurt anybody or me or anybody else, but I guess looking back on it, maybe I should have let him stay somewhere else. You know.
What about you?
That's how Fred is.
What about you? Have you been frightened of clients?
I have. Well, no, I've never really been frightened of a
Or
client.
did you have difficult clients?
I've had difficult clients. When I worked at Legal Aid, we had to do intake, and one day a week in those days, we'd just interview whoever would come in. After you got a client, it was determined that the client had the client's claim had merit, and that pretty much you could work with them and things like that. So there was no problem. But the general intake would be just anyone who had any kind of a issue or problem or thought they needed a lawyer, and it was always an interesting day when you did the intake interviews. But one time a guy came into intake and he had a landlord-tenant problem, and I told him that he was going to lose. He had a hearing the next day, and I told him that he hadn't paid his rent and he didn't have any defenses, but I gave him some pointers on some ways that he might earn a little more time there, and some things to say to the judge. But it wasn't the kind of case we would take, because it was kind of we called it a merit, that we wouldn't provide a lawyer for it. So the next day, he went to the court, and the court ordered him evicted, and he didn't get any extra time, and he came back to Legal Aid, and he broke a window, and one of the big, huge plate glass windows, and it was right next to my office, adjacent to my office, that window, and he came in and he threatened the receptionist, and then he pushed his way into my office. He had a funny little knife, like a table knife or something, and he held it up to my neck, and yelled at me and told me that I had failed him as a lawyer, and then he stomped out. And quite frankly, maybe I should have been afraid, but I wasn't. He was very, very angry, and I knew that we had to take care of the situation, and I didn't know if it would explode any further, but I didn't think he would hurt me. He just was letting off steam, I thought. But I think he got in some kind of trouble for it. Got arrested or something for it. But I wasn't. Do you remember that, don't you?
Yeah.
That happened, yeah.
Did that scare you? That happened to her?
Well, I heard about it after.
No.
I think you can be fearful of people, or you can embrace life. And I don't think we've ever thought about it that way. We've ever said, oh, let's embrace people and let's like people. We've never talked about that before. But I think in general, people are good people. We send our kids to public school. Our kids go to Tucson High School, and we live in this central neighborhood. We work in the central neighborhood, and we know the people we know are nice people. The people we work with are nice people. So I think it's, in general, we trust people.
Maybe
Especially Fred. Fred really trusts people.
Yeah, maybe we're naive. I mean, I've talked to other public defenders, and most of, it's offensive to have security devices and bulletproof windows like you see when you go to some offices, and in courthouses now, judges there's a lot of guards around, and you got to get through locked doors. And we've tended not to want to have that, but we do have it because it's sort of been imposed on us by the U.S. Marshal Service, which is responsible for security for some reason in our office, and we've got panic alarms that they've installed. We've never used them, and we never wanted them, but they're there.
But you don't have metal detectors anymore, those
No.
machines you go through.
No.
They used to have those when they were in the same office with
Well, that was
pretrial
for another
services.
agency, yeah.
And boy, the minute that other office got out of the building, Fred's office got rid of those.
Yeah, we didn't want to pay for that. I mean, it's offensive to have to, in a private law firm, you don't treat clients like that, and just because our clients are charged with a criminal offense, they are presumed innocent, and if they're on a release status, they're under a lot of monitoring. They're probably a lot safer than some of the people you run across in the street. So, I've never really been afraid of them. I'm more afraid of people that I don't know, and the unknown, and these are people you know. So,
You're not afraid of really anything.
yeah.
We talked to Larry Hammond, and he was talking about how to proceed with clients, and it was a very sort of mostly because it was capital cases and very sort of we do a lot of interviewing, talking to them. It's sort of very sort of long, drawn out, and I thought maybe we could talk about both legal aid and the public defender's office. How reasonable is that? I mean, in terms of clients, like how sort of, I guess it depends on what clients you have, but sort of the response to that. I mean, it was like they send someone every week to talk to the client and to get all this information.
I think that's important. You know, it's I mean, in a public defender office, these clients didn't pick you for a lawyer. They just said, I can't afford a lawyer, and you were appointed. And I think it's real important to have contact with them and deal with them and let them know that you care about them. In my experience, the lawyers that have had client problems have been those that they may be working on the case, but they're not dealing with the client. And I think you got to deal with them. You got to go visit them where they're incarcerated. You got to handle their families, and then pretty soon they'll start feeling more comfortable with you. I mean, it's like, you know, when you go to a doctor and the doctor just says, okay, what's your problem? Okay, and tells the nurse to give him a shot and goes, I mean, that makes you feel, you know, there's some human relations that you need to deal with. And so I think client relations are important. And what Larry Hammond, who is probably one of the finest lawyers in the state, says is absolutely true. And I know he does that.
But you've always taken, and I think a lot of people in your office take extra time to do that. I can't tell you how many holidays Fred spent at the prison. And he thinks Easter afternoon is for going to the prison. But
well, I kind of like to visit clients on off hours or on a holiday because they say, what are you doing here? That's amazing. You know, and all of a sudden there's this, they kind of like it, you know, and they've got this confidence that maybe you didn't have before. I don't do that much anymore, but I've done it.
Yeah,
Plus it's convenient. You know, it's off hours.
I just had something.
Oh, I was going to answer something about that. I think actually there's a certain amount of freedom you get from working, at least in the days when I worked at Legal Aid were much different than Legal Aid is right now because the funding, we could take any case we wanted and we had adequate funding and great support staff. And I think there are much more restrictions on Legal Aid right now in the type of cases and what they can do. But when you're a federal public defender, which is an adequately funded office, as opposed to some of the county defenders around the country, and if you were at Legal Aid, at least when I was there, you had a certain freedom to spend the time you wanted on a case, that you didn't have to bill your hours, you didn't have to justify it to a client or to a funding source of any sort. And so I found that if I had a meritorious client, for instance, I had a number of asylum cases out of both Africa and Central America, that those clients could never, ever, no one could have ever afforded the lawyer time that went into their case. But because it was a meritorious case and because my office supported me and my director supported me, I could spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours on each individual case. We also had the cases where I'm sure at Legal Aid, and I'm sure at any office, you think about what the consequences are. So on some extremely meritorious landlord-tenant case where they're going to lose an apartment that's at market value, and it's not going to be, you're not going to spend as much time on it as you might if the client's going to lose a house that there's a lot of equity in. So you look at those things of what the penalties are, and of course the danger was being sent back to death and torture, so you wanted to work harder on those. But don't you think you have a certain freedom as a public defender to just do what you think is appropriate for a case?
I think so, because if you're in private practice and you've got bills to take care of and staff and computer equipment and phone lines, you really can't probably justify spending a lot of time with this so-called minor case. But as a public defender, we don't worry about that because we're on a salary, we have an office, and it's just time with us. So maybe that's why I'm not a good user of time, because I don't mind doing it because I'm not worried about paying bills. I'm going to get salary anyway, so I might as well do the work.
What about another thing that Larry Hammond said was that in terms of a difficult client, that he sort of made a point that clients that lie, that wasn't a difficult client because there were so many reasons for them not to trust the system that that was just to sort of indicated to him that they needed more trust, that there was a sort of a different sort of sort of the client, what a difficult client was, didn't include lying. I thought maybe we could talk about either the lying part or the difficult client part.
I don't know. I think most clients are pretty honest with their defense lawyer. That's their lawyer. They should be. But there are people out there, and clients and other people, that are what I would call pathological liars, and they'll just tell you things, and it doesn't check out, and it becomes very discouraging because you're trying to work up your case, and you come into all these dead ends, and you have all this information, it doesn't pan out, and that gets very discouraging. And I think those are hard, and why they do it, I don't know. That perhaps some kind of mental illness or something, but that's a thing to deal with, because it's very important for you to have credibility with the court and with opposing counsel, and if you're giving them information or you're sharing information that may not be truthful, you've got some problems. So if you learn that you can't trust this client's word, it becomes very problematical, I think. I mean, that's probably why we have them as clients, because they have this problem, but it's more difficult, I think, to deal with.
I think maybe it's different working at legal aid and working at a public defender's office too. The clients, than it is in a private law firm. The clients aren't paying for your services, and so in many respects they don't get after you as much and don't demand as much out of you, and sometimes aren't as knowledgeable about some business clients, about practices and what a lawyer is expected to do. I have generally found Fred's clients and my clients, and I've known many of Fred's clients, to be very thankful and to be very grateful. I have never found more gracious clients than the immigration clients that I spent time with for about a decade at legal aid. And I think that some of the most difficult clients are ones that want unrealistic results and that won't listen to reason. It's not necessarily those that lie or those that won't show up on time or those that won't get their information back to you or won't. Sometimes you get frustrated because you ask them to bring you some papers or some documents or to bring in a witness or something, they don't do it. I think it's mostly when they demand something that's unreasonable and unlikely to happen. So it's very hard to compromise or to come to a plea agreement or to come to to negotiate the problem or even to have any adequate success after you litigate the problem. But I found, I think your clients and my clients have been in general very thankful and very gracious. Very gracious.
There are some. It's not uncommon to have criminal clients that don't view you as a lawyer. You're a public defender, and you always hear this joke. You always hear this joke about they're going to hire a real lawyer. I've had clients say that they're going to hire, as soon as they get some money together, they're going to hire a real lawyer, like they don't think you're a lawyer. So there's a certain trust that they don't have because they're not paying for it. And to me, it's sad to see some of these people hire what they call a real lawyer, and the lawyer is not a good lawyer, and they spend a lot of money, and the lawyer makes some exorbitant promises just to keep them paying and to keep them going, and they're not realistic. That's one of the luxuries of being a public defender, I think, is you can be honest with your client and say, look, this is grim, this is what you're facing, and I'm telling you the truth. I'm not telling it to make you feel bad or good, but this is the truth. And I think there are some, not a lot of lawyers, that don't do that because they want the client to think they have some false expectations and keep paying, and we don't have to deal with that. We don't have to give them those false expectations. We can be honest, and I think that's better.
All right, we're going to switch topics because we're going to run out of time. Strategies for dealing with balancing life and work and family, tips and things that you guys have found that work or don't work, or like helpful hints. Any idea, any thoughts?
Well, I think you got to get your sleep. I think you just can't go very long. I try to get enough sleep every night. I don't always do it. And I think you gotta get some exercise, and you just that's the way I do downtime. I don't watch TV hardly ever, and I'm not a big person to go out or anything. I don't socialize that much, but I do well with myself. I don't need a lot of stimulation, I don't think.
Why are you laughing?
Well, I'm laughing. It's so funny. So you ask a question like, how do you cope and deal? Well, get a good night's sleep. It's because he is a confident humble man, I think, and doesn't create problems when there aren't any. I'll tell you what I think the answer to your question is. I think in our life together, I think it's in choosing a partner in life, if you choose to choose one, who's honorable and who shares your values. And if you trust and respect the person you're married to, which I do, then I think most of the problems in the marriage are minor ones. I think there's such goodwill between Fred and me that even when things are crazy, but don't you think that you would never? I think there's such goodwill about respecting each other.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of respect,
Yeah.
both ways. I think. I know I feel it. So
Suzanne's good at complimenting people when I'm not, so. But I agree with what she said.
no, it is true that if there's shared values and if you marry an honorable person who's not selfish, I think you're a very lucky woman. I think I'm a lucky woman.
Okay, so I'm going to get specific. What is shared values? What do you mean by that?
You could never articulate that, could you?
I defer on that one.
I mean, is shared values like shared political values or shared values on who takes the garbage out?
Oh, no.
Or, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, what is a shared value system?
I think that Fred. It sounds too puffed up to even say it out loud, but I mean, what I love about Fred is he's a very honest man, and I've always been able to trust everything he told me, and he's a humble man, and you don't.
It's getting pretty corny, isn't it?
I think that we've never searched after wealth. I think for sure. Well, we may have wanted it, but it's never come to us. And, but our goal has not wealth or attention, especially not Fred's. And we've also been really focused on family. And Fred's focus on family is a very quiet focus. And
What do you mean by that?
meaning you'd never see Fred say, "I'm a great father. I like to play Little League with my kid," or something. I think he's just a quiet presence.
I'm just
for
there
our
every
children.
day, you know.
No, he's a real quiet presence for the children and for me. So I mean, it does get kind of corny, but in the end, I think if you I respect him because he has very, very simple values and he lives by them. He doesn't seem to be a hypocrite. That's it. I think you could say that both Fred and I hate phonies.
Okay, what about all the dumb chores and like picking up kids, and how do you balance that with having two careers?
She
And
does it all.
you do it all?
You wouldn't
I
say.
defer.
Actually, since I've started back to work full-time, nobody does it. We're really working on getting the kids to do it, but sometimes that's an uphill battle. Yeah.
As they get older, it's easier.
It
Become
gets
more
harder.
independent. No, they can ride the bus.
Harder. No. They leave. We have a daughter leaving for college tomorrow, and she's great about helping driving our son and making dinner and cleaning up around the house. And when I come home, things are really, really in good shape. When I come home from work, she's generally planned dinner, and generally the house is picked up and clean. And I'm going to miss her so much. I can't tell you how much I'm going to miss the help that she gives me. I can't say the same for Fred and our son Joe. I wish I could.
I'll just have to pick up the slack.
We've never figured out a way to share chores. I think there's not generally a division of labor based upon gender. I don't think Fred thinks he's not capable of doing the dishes or he's too good to do the dishes, but we're both busy and
I do them all the time.
he does them occasionally. And we don't have a system. I do the dishes on Mondays and you do them on Tuesdays, or I take Joe to saxophone in January and you take him in February. Every day's an adventure of figuring out if we can get what's taken care of, what we need to take care of, taken care of. Yeah. And we don't fight about it, ever. It's just sometimes you come into our house and it's filthy. Can't give you any more.
Any other thoughts about that stuff? Yeah.
Fred likes to do things himself. And he likes our family to be very self-sufficient and not hire anybody to help us. That's a value he has, wouldn't you say?
Right.
It's a really strong
Right.
value Fred has of.
I don't like helpless people that can't do anything, you know.
And so that's been a little bit of a tension because sometimes I've wanted to get some help around the house, and he views that as a weakness and a failure in our family. I think one time he said to me, "What do you think we ought to do? Hire someone to wipe our butts for us?" Do you remember saying that?
Never
Yes,
said
you
that.
did that. You said that.
I don't talk like that.
Yes, you did. But I think that don't put that in.
It won't be in.
But
Trust me, it won't be in.
I never
Yeah.
said it, sorry.
Yeah,
That's right, that's right.
I never said it.
maybe wipe your bottom. But
I
I
don't
think
use
that
that.
he
That's
really
good.
doesn't like anybody to be hired, and he sees somebody picking up your dishes for you or doing your lawn work for you as really a failure in our family. And he really believes strong. And I agree with him, but sometimes it just doesn't get done. And I agree with that value. And Fred has also really believes in not spoiling kids, that they should ride the bus and that they should ride their bikes and they should help around the house, and no designer clothes and no fancy schools and no.
Doesn't work out that way, but we're trying.
And I really value, I respect that, and our kids respect that. They've never given any flack to him really about that. Sometimes they do take the car when he wants them to take the bicycle, but I think no one's ever rebelled against that of the four kids, because
They're not big clothes people.
they respect him so much that it's almost embarrassing to take the car when Fred is at home. When Fred's not at home, we take the car, but when Fred is at home, we don't. So that's been an issue of whether we hire help. Sure. Good values. Fred has good
Yeah.
values.
Should we do the last question?
Sure. Sure.
All right, happiest moment in life in law, or happy moments. When you think about a happy moment or happiest moment.
In the life, in our law,
Uh-huh.
I don't want to talk about life, but when you, in the law, when you have a jury trial and you get an acquittal, that makes you pretty happy. Makes you feel like you're better than you really are. Gives you this inflated value for a short time. That's fun.
My turn?
Mm-hmm.
I think my happiest moments, I agree with Fred, winning a case. Winning a case that really means something to you. A few years ago, I represented some really close friends of our family in an asylum case that was really 15 or 16 years old. They had entered the country 15 or 16 years before. And I remember when I received the notice that we had won that asylum case, and I called the family to tell them we had won. I actually, the woman had to call me back, and she left a message on the machine, the wife in the family, and I kept that message on my machine for several years in the stored file because I couldn't stand to delete it. Her joy was so great, and I just, those are the moments in law, when you win a case,
Yeah.
especially one that's important.
Especially one that's, that means something. Let's say in a criminal case when the client's innocent, which some of them are, that really makes you feel good. Because those are the ones that you get the most nervous in. At least I do. When you really believe the person is innocent of what they're charged with, and you really got, you got their life in your hands at that point. So.
Is there ever a situation where it's the opposite, where you think someone's done something and they get off, and that makes you not scared, obviously?
I'm kind of an anti-establishment person. That makes me.
Yeah, so it's okay.
Unless they're a real dangerous person or something like that. That just doesn't happen very often, or if at all.
Well,
When you're a public defender, I think you're struggling to get your client a fair trial,
Yeah.
and you're struggling to get them charged with maybe what they actually did, as opposed to overcharged, with mandatory sentences now, and with the makeup of the Supreme Court and things. I can't think of a time Fred has come home worried with him or anyone in his office that someone dangerous might go out on the streets. That just doesn't occur.
The whole system is pretty much against you. You've got a prosecutor doing their job, You've got a judicial system where judges, after years and years, become kind of hard, and they've seen it all, and here's the same story over, whatever. You've got courthouse personnel, you've got probation officers, and I'm very friendly with all these people, but they believe that my clients are guilty, and I'm just there because you have to have a lawyer in the system, and I don't always view it that way. So it makes you feel pretty good. A good result when you get the court to understand, or get a jury to understand what you're talking about. So
I do have a friend really good friend it's the only story I know personally about this, and he represented a client, and the client was acquitted by reason of insanity. It was a murder case, and I think the client, he was insane under the definition of insanity at the time. And the next year, that client killed again, and he quit the practice of criminal law. Is now a business lawyer as a result of that experience, and I think that could really, really shake someone else if it happened to either Fred or me or anyone that would send you into a tailspin. But that is so rare. Of course, they've changed the definition of insanity since that time to take care of, and one of the reasons was that particular case.
Interesting. Well, this is great. Anything else before we end? Any thoughts or no?
it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're back to Katie in law
All right.
school.
I didn't like law school, and I felt that many of the professors and the tone of law school was not respectful of me or my law students. But once I got on the other side and I started teaching, I think two things. I think, first of all, law school has changed now, and there is a general bigger feeling of community here and at other law schools all around the country. But I also think I didn't understand the difficulty of teaching, and the difficulty of grading, and the difficulty of interacting with students. And I've had my own challenges in that area. So I have a better understanding of what it was like to be a law professor at that time.
What do you mean? About
Can I just end there?
No.
No.
Sorry.
Well, I'll tell you what. When I was in law school, for instance, if there were 100 people in a class, you would have a couple of A's. You would, two A's in the class. You would have 10, 12 B's, and the rest would be C's, D's, and F's. And that was, most of our classes had about 100 in them. And so that was most classes. And the very large bulk of them would be C's in a class. Very few D's and F's, I think. Well, I thought that was unfair. I had really bright people who were sitting with me in class, who were my friends, who were studying with me. They were struggling. They couldn't get above a C. It was a nightmare. The professors weren't very encouraging. We didn't understand. I thought that was just cruel and unusual punishment. Well, I then went to Berkeley and taught, and one of the professors there had a medical problem, and I had to read a set of exams while I was there. And since then, I've read many a set of exams. But I remember reading like 100 exams and seeing that one or two of them were just beautiful. They got all the issues, and they were written really beautifully, and about 10 or 12 of them were above average. They got all the issues, but maybe didn't write them very well, or were really written well and only missed a little thing. But they were really above average papers. And then there was this mass of papers that were all good, and they got the issues, but they were sort of stream of consciousness and hadn't divided the issues completely right, but they'd attended class, and they knew it, and they would be good lawyers, and it was impossible for me to tell the difference between, to grade the difference between that. And all of a sudden I understood why there were 85 C's in a class, and why there should be no stigma to getting a C in those classes. So I had an epiphany at that moment of really what I had never understood before of grading. And many of those things have come later on. For instance, students come to me now and say, I recommend we do it this way, or I think a class would be better if it were run this way. And I want to throw my arms around them and say, I agree with you 100%. I think that would be such a better way to run a class and so much more educational. And could you please donate $250,000 a year to the law school so we can afford to do that? We're really constrained by resources here, and I'm especially constrained in the writing program by the resources I have. And I think there's general goodwill by the people in the law school, the professors, faculty, staff, be as kind and as good and as helpful and as educational, as creative as possible. But I'll tell you what, when you're struggling with the number of students and the curriculum that you need to teach them to prepare them for the bar exam and to be lawyers, you can't always do what you could in a perfect world. So I'm sure that there were financial constraints that I didn't even know about at the time I felt critical when I was in law school.
Okay, one more question. You don't have to answer it. Everyone complains, well, you probably know this, about the workload of writing. They are, even the LLM, I mean, no, it's the routine thing of, I have to do legal writing, and there's just sort of this and I just thought maybe you could address that. Maybe you don't, I mean, because the point is that it's like good for you. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like you have to learn it. And sort of, is there a particular attitude students should go into legal writing with? Because, I don't know, is that a fair question to ask you?
Oh, it's such a broad question.
I know.
Since I do legal writing for a living,
Right. Well,
I have about 100 answers to that. But I do think that one of the frustrations with legal writing is that you do your best job. You write, you put a lot of time into it, and if it's a graded course that you're taking, you get a grade back. And sometimes you don't even really understand what a good piece of writing would look like. Either you're not provided that feedback, or you don't think the feedback's clear enough, or you could use a model answer, or things like that. And I think that that's a real resource issue for us here at the law school, because I think that that's really frustrating to students to put in the work and to not receive the feedback or understand. And so sometimes they become frustrated with writing because they feel like they're not getting any better. They're not understanding what they need to do to get better. And so with the training of the writing professors and the working with the faculty in our new program in legal writing, we're hoping to address that issue. But if legal writing is graded, I'll tell you what, it's stressful, and it takes a long time when you know that there's a grade at the end of it. And there's no doubt about it. The problem with it is that it's one of the most time-consuming things to do, and it's one of the most resource-full. In other words, you need a lot of staff to teach legal writing correctly and well. The legal profession values it. That if you speak to judges, if you speak to people nationwide, they say legal writing is the most important skill. Please help these people write their issues better. Please help them cut down their number of words. Please them get them to the point. Things like that. But it takes so much time to learn that very important skill. Other skills are much quicker to learn. The rules of evidence. So I guess my answer is pretty rambling to that question. But by and large, I think it's a painful thing to change your writing. Students haven't been taught the skill of writing in the same way that we used to be taught writing. People haven't diagrammed sentences. People, when I tell them that they have a misplaced modifier or a dangling participle, they say, I don't know what a participle is. When I talk to them about basic rules of comma placement or basic rules of paragraphing, they have never ever practiced that at the 6th grade level where it should be practiced. Now this is only some students, but it's a problem nationwide. They come here and they're hit with a new language of the law. They're hit with concepts that they haven't ever grappled with before, and then they have to write and make sense out of it, and they don't have the training that we used to get in writing. I think it can be very difficult for students. So that's all I know. I didn't answer your question very well.
No, you did. It was good. It was very good.
But anyway, so
Thank you.
Fred's great.